Hello and welcome to the Strange Dominions, where we attempt to unlock the mysteries behind the unseen and unheard, the unknown and unknowable. I am your host, Octavian Graves. Tonight, Ian and I interview Lonnie Scott. Lonnie is the host and creator of Weird Web Radio, is working on a book about using magic to investigate the paranormal. We speak on many things, from chaos magic, paganism, the paranormal, and much more. I want to give a shout out to all my patrons, because we could not do the show without you, and we really thank you for being here and supporting everything we do. If you have seen something strange or unusual, such as a cryptid, spirit, UFO, or anything in between, please send me an email at strangedominionspodcast@gmail.com for your opportunity to be on the show. If you are enjoying what we are doing here and would like to support the show and get extra content, you can become a patron, starting at just $4 a month. With that, you get extra episodes, merchandise, and the opportunity to be on the show. Link for all that will be in the show notes below. Without further ado, we bring you our interview with Lonnie Scott of Weird Web Radio. All right, tonight, me and Ian are speaking to Lonnie Scott, podcaster and author. How you doing?
Thank you again for having me on. I really appreciate it.
Oh, yeah, no, it's our pleasure.
Good. Yeah, it's wonderful to have you on here. I've been kind of becoming a huge fanboy going through your podcast and seeing your work. And I knew you were on Hellier, and we can talk about that if you like to later. But yeah, welcome to Strange Dominions. It's wonderful to have you.
Hey, I'm pretty stoked to be here. I've been likewise checking out your guys' show ever since I got, you reached out to me and invited me to be a guest. I mean, one of my personal philosophies when it comes to podcasting and, all the creative sort of community that we have is this idea of mutual flourishing. That if it's good for me, it's good for you, and vice versa. And one thing that drives me nuts, because I've run into it every time or two, is you invite someone to be on a show and they just say, oh, well, you're not famous enough, or you don't have enough followers on social media or anything, as if that's an actual reflection of your audience anyway. I don't care. All I care is that when I go vet somebody that invites me is that you're inclusive, you're not a bunch of racists and bigots, and I'll listen to 3 or 4 of your episodes to make sure you don't do gotcha questions. If you satisfy those things, I'm game to be on anybody's show.
Well, I mean, that very much likewise. We go through the same process, and we have the same kind of check marks. And you definitely checked all those boxes for us when we went through it, and that's why I really wanted to have you on the show, especially because of how similar our our theories are, and our our motivations to do these kind of shows. So you were very fit to be on.
I'll take that. Thanks.
So not to ask too obvious questions, but where did this all start for you? I mean, when did this all begin? Both the paranormal and magic.
All right. Oh, I got lost in a Kmart when I was 7. No, I'm kidding. They kind of have an intermixed beginning, because I wasn't raised to be anything. I think it's important to that whole origin story to always kind of go through this part. My parents were what I call coffee table Christians. They had the big dusty Bible that no one ever opened. They have a picture of a white dude in a robe that everybody thought was Jesus. The very popular one, that had the little clock on it back in the 80s.
The Borgia Jesus.
Yeah. Well, for me, I call him Jedi Jesus, because he looks a lot like Ewan McGregor.
Bringing the mullet back.
Right. So, but they didn't attend any church. We didn't have some Sunday thing. My sister and I were never taken to be baptized or anything like that. Just religion was that thing that was in our house that was only as far as it's just kind of embedded in our culture. It wasn't anything like shoved down our throat or forced on us. So along the way, I get curious and weird anyway. There's something about the spiritual and weird stuff that makes me really, really curious no matter what. Part of that is horror movies, like Monster Squad and stuff like that. When I was a kid coming out, makes me think, well, maybe I can go find some of these things. So we would head out to the local cemetery at night with the great big mausoleum with BB guns and wait for the vampire to come out. Yeah, never found one, but I'm 45. I'm still trying. So I went through some things like that. When the paranormal kind of comes along, what people classically think of as the paranormal. I was in an old funeral home that had been converted into a family's home in Southern Illinois. And we were spending the night with somebody who was taking us on this trip. And we were sleeping in the room that I call, because I don't know what else to call them. I'm not that familiar with the funeral industry, but I would call it the viewing room. It'd be the long room where people gather, and you'd have the coffin at one end and everybody sitting at the other end, and the services would be conducted and so on. So this room has been converted into kind of a family game room kind of thing in this big old house. So I don't know what time it was. It was just really late at night, and I got woke up, and what I see when I wake up is something that I can only describe it as smoky, but not smoke, luminescent, but not light. Just enough of it that when it moves, you can notice there's a shape there. And the shape that I was looking at was something similar to the shape of a woman. I wanted to know why. I was probably 13 at the time, I think 12 or 13. So all of this occurs over the span of like 40 seconds. I follow this thing to the front of the room. It stops. So I stop. It knows I'm following it. It just stops there. And then after a few seconds, it turns and it goes out the wall to the left. Now I got to find out what happened. I wake up everybody. What the fuck is going on? They don't know what's going on. We're looking all over the room. I'm trying to find a projector of some kind, because maybe they've played a trick on us, or, like any explanation I can come up with at all. Like, what the fuck was that? And nothing satisfied me, like nothing.
Mm-hmm. They were probably all just like, go to bed.
Yeah. Well, this is the beginning of they knew I was weird. So a few years later, they did reconstruction to this place, and they did discover that along that wall where I saw the figure go out, that the wall had been built to cover an old doorway and a short hallway where there was another doorway that went outside. Yeah. So in my mind, I kind of think for some reason, whatever the reasons may be, that you get a residual style haunting where, it's something as if it's being played back on the environment. I suspect that's probably what I saw. And it's more interesting to me after the fact because of the way it all just kind of went. It's almost as if I was getting some playback of a woman walking through a room of people, stopping in front of a coffin, pausing, saying whatever her respects or goodbyes are, and then turning and going out those two doors that they found that the walls had been built over. I mean, it seems like a playback,
almost like an etheric imprint that kind of
digs
in. And
those residual things are really interesting to me. I don't think they get enough, I don't know, curiosity, I guess, or investigation from people. They're always the one where, it's just a residual haunting. Next, they're looking for an intelligent thing. But my thing is, like, if there's a place that, for whatever reason, conditions arrive at certain intervals to play back something from the past or perhaps the future, or giving you something that's coming from the other world itself, but it's a consistent thing that you see time and time again, then there's something peculiar about that particular location that me as a magic practitioner, I'm thinking, well, what's possible here versus somewhere else,
And that's kind of where my mind goes to it too. It's like, well, like what specifically is making this a memory or an imprint as opposed to any other thing that could have happened?
Mm-hmm.
And
sure.
Now, quick question about that in your memory. Like you said, you kind of followed the apparition and then it walked away. Do you think it registered you?
No, I don't.
It was just, because I remember you said it kind of stopped, but you think it was just going on its way and it wasn't interactive with you at all.
Like I was like, oh shit, it's going to turn around. But I never got a sense that it did. And it's one of those things, like, the more you look straight on it, the less it has substance or is clear. Now, granted, I'm 45 years old now. this happened when I was like 12 years old. I don't know that I'm remembering some of this wrong. I just know that I am. Knowing how memory works, right? But it's also one of it at the time was such an emotional impact on me that it has stuck with me all these years as kind of, yeah, I always remember it as that's the origin. That's when I knew, no matter what anybody told me, that I knew something was weird and some of this was real. And I've been seeking those mysteries and curiosity ever since.
Yeah, no, that's, I think a lot of us probably share that original founding moment that kind of clicks and you're like, all right, I'm kind of getting used to the world because I'm young. But then you're given that, like, well, there's more to it than everybody else is telling me there is. And that's fine.
Right.
Then you get older and it sticks with you and you're like, well, I want to know. Like, I'm curious.
Oh, it got worse. I got into witchcraft and shit.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, so where does that begin for you?
So I was a little bit older before I really delved into anything in the occult, and it was just a random encounter with a guy that I met, an older dude. We became friends, and he gave me this book. It's Celtic Magic by DJ Conway. It's total garbage. But for me at that time in that place, it was great. Like, I've never read anything that said, oh, you can do all this other shit. So what else to do but read through it and try to figure out if it's okay, and getting nervous and hiding it in the house. Because while we weren't a religious family, I thought there's no way anybody's going to approve of this.
Right. Some people can get very religious suddenly when it comes to certain things.
Right.
Like, oh, you never went to church, but you feel strongly about this book.
Yeah.
You're going to let me know.
Right. So I got that. I always remember that as like the first thing. I got that, and off to the Walden Books and the library and everything else. We had a Walden Books in our mall. Library really didn't have much of anything useful except for like encyclopedias and things like that more than anything. Walden Books in the early 90s had a lot of Sylvia Browne books, some paperback Necronomicons published by Avon. It's still out there, by the way, and I kind of have a soft spot for that one personally.
Which one? Simon's?
The Simon Necronomicon, published by Avon Books. Yeah, just fuck up the universe for $7.95.
Just hang out in these tunnels. You'll be fine. What
It'll
tunnels?
Be fine.
Don't ask.
I know we made it up. But go ahead, try it. No.
Somebody actually brought up that Necronomicon. I was talking like an IMs with people last night, and somebody had brought it up. And, like they had somebody, you know how internet people, you'll just get randos sending you a message, especially when you in the occult crowds, and they were saying like, I did a show on a podcast about the real Necronomicon. Like, the old one? The Latin? They're like, no, the one with the black one with Simon on it. Like, well, did it work?
I have the yellow version.
Yeah.
It's interesting about that.
I
know some people who've gotten some stuff to work from there, but I don't know if that's my wheelhouse.
I got into all that. I tried everything. Yeah, I even read the Sylvia Browne stuff because what do I know? I was just a kid trying to figure out, like, I've seen a ghost. This is what my brain says. So there's more to this for sure. And I didn't find the answers I was looking for, any of that. I mean, I tried out LaVey's Satanic Bible. I will say, though, in the middle of a cornfield, this is something when I was about 15, 16, I had a group of friends. One of our favorite things to do was to go out into the woods and the cornfields and try to find all those little forgotten cemeteries that are everywhere. And one of those nights in the middle of one of those cornfields, I'm doing the invocation to Satan or Lucifer or whatever the hell it is that LaVey called it out of that book. And some peculiar things happened. Yeah, it got windy, and like you could feel the charge in the air, and it scared the shit out of my friends. So, yeah. So what do? I keep playing with it. No.
Absolutely. You know, some people, you look back at like some of the books that came out in like the 70s, 80s that now we kind of like, well, it's probably not the best magical technique that we can find, but sometimes maybe that still got a lot of people into it in the first place, and then they grew. So, we could judge on their technical like worth at a scholarly level, but there's still a lot of worth in a lot of those books and just what they did, the catalyst factor.
Well, yeah,
they were there. They were there.
The greatest thing that happened for me in my magical pursuits was when I was about 17 years old. This guy named Chuck Smith, he's dead and gone now. It's funny. Two of the most important people to who I've become are both dead and gone now. Paul Peterson on one hand gets me into heathenry and runes and stuff like that, and Chuck gets me into chaos magic. But when I was 17, Chuck, he's involved in the Golden Dawn, whatever form or shape or whatever it was in those real early internet days. I don't know who. Yeah, for all I know, it was him and a guy in a trailer. I have no idea. So he hands me Lieber Nolan Psychonaut by Pete Carroll and hands it to me. And he's like, this book is dark. It's perfect for you. But that's the one that became such an important foundation to now I'm not just like experimenting with the stuff to see how it works. Now I really know it can work. And it's got a legit like, even now, I look back on like Lieber Knoll. It's been re-released by Wiser Books in their classic series. Lieber MMM in there, like it is some of the most hardcore, serious training. If you want to do magic, there is, and it stands up to the test of time. It's one of the greatest things out there if you want to go that route. But looking back on those shit books and things that we kind of crap on them. I experimented out of them and I got things to work, and it has nothing to do with that author's scholarship or the effort they put into it or anything. It's what I tell people all the time when they're like, well, how do I get started? What's the perfect book for me? And I'm like, well, I've got a couple of recommendations, but the most important thing to do to get started is start. I mean, for all I care, order one of those goofy ass spell kits online and fucking do it.
Yep. It's the do it.
Just do it.
You want to get good, just do it over and over. And like the books that you need will come to you. They might not be an objective best book, but that doesn't matter. Like it's what is instigating you. Like, it's parallel with me, like Lieber Nolan.
I think the other thing that's really important is like those books, they should, like for me, I got started with Lieber Null and I tried to do like the meditations and I got sick of it really quickly. And I was like, okay, this is boring. This isn't magic. Where's like, show me the good stuff. And then I read Condensed Chaos, where Phil Hines talking about, the ultimate thing you can do in chaos magic is not do chaos magic and believe in something and then just kind of drop it. And then I got into ceremonial magic and, now I found my home. But I probably would not have gotten into that if I hadn't started from a chaos perspective. So I think that some of these really crappy books, their job is to get you mad to go out and find the real stuff,
Right.
I kind of argue, like for me, definitely Lieber Null, Condensed Chaos, like a lot of the more obscure books. I kind of had a lot of studies going on when I was younger, and even today, I never considered myself a denominational magician. It was just like I'm playing with magic, and there's so much I can do. But early chaos magic, and I still hold this today. Like that is pure bare bones training, and it's good. It's stuff, and it not only what's in there, because that. Most of those books they tell you it's like, hey, this is just a method. The whole point of this is you build your own thing and just do it and do it as hard as you can until something happens and then run with it. And that's still like, and I always looked at it, I was talking about somebody with this, like kind of the difference between certain like grimoire magic and chaos magic. And I just look at it as simply like some magic you work with spirits or forces and you kind of ask or get them to do things for you. And that's magic. Like chaos magic and things like that, I've always looked at it like that is increasing your personal power. Like as your own, like that's magic coming from you that you're doing. Not to say it doesn't include other people, or not other people, but spirits or forces. It's kind of like, well, I'm kind of contracting versus I'm lifting this weight myself. And that's kind of like, and it's good to do both. So I don't know. I always recommend that people look at all those things. Take the books that come to you and. Like magic will teach you in the way you need to be taught, and you just have to pay attention and keep at it. there's a lot of value in a lot of things, I think.
Oh, absolutely. And I think coming up in that era was interesting too, because especially within chaos magic, because in the book world, the two big ones were Pete Carroll and Phil Hine. You brought up Condensed Chaos. I wore that fucking book out. I had to buy two. I created a servitor out of that book all those years ago that's still up and running today. I wrote about it on my blog at weirdwebradio.com. Go on the blog. There's a servitor on there named Pugs. It deals with gargoyles. He helps you find lost things. Ben, I cooked that fucker up way back with Condensed Chaos. He's been running ever since. He's found missing people. He's found missing keys. Like, it's a thing. It is a thing. So, yeah, I got a lot of miles out of Condensed Chaos. What I like, Phil Hine made chaos magic like accessible. He had a storytelling quality to his writing that was like you were reading Carlos Castaneda or something, only it was chaos magic instead of some shamanism. And Pete Carroll had a way to put you to sleep. Like, he was the professor.
Yeah, he did. Yeah.
Yeah, he is the professor. But I will say this. Even if meditation and those contemplation practices are found boring, that's fine. They're supposed to be. The greatest benefit you get out of an exercise like that, it makes me sad when I hear people bail on a practice like that in any way, shape, or form, because, especially if you're going to get into spirit work, right? The key that meditation and these contemplation exercises give you more than anything than concentration and all that is discernment. Discernment. Like, it will allow you the best chance to know the difference between the voice in your head versus the voice of a spirit.
Yeah, I mean, I meditated pretty often anyway. But that's that was what I think was missing, was that, because in Liber Null, it's not, there's no aim in the meditation there except for like self-development. Like, the spirit aspect isn't present. I didn't get into meditation until I realized that there was a spiritual aspect in the respect that it can teach you how to talk to things and communicate with things. That was when I started getting into it. So yeah, but on that level, yeah, I definitely agree with that.
Yeah, I think like that discernment's one of the most important words you can use, and it's not a word that I feel like people who have done their work will use it, even though it's not like here's your magical, you know what I mean? Because it's just such an inherently, it's a thing. Like, you need to do it, and I think it'll develop over time. But putting that effort can save you a lot of problems and get a lot more out of your work, whether you're trying to work with spirits or just trying to discern your own upper thought process from the feelings coming out of your heart and your spirit. So yeah,
it lets you smell your own shit.
Exactly.
Like,
absolutely.
Are your spirits always agreeing with you? Do you find them constantly nodding yes? Then you need to act now and start meditation.
Yeah, and a lot of people, like, they'll get caught up, especially when they get a little further into their work, and sometimes spirits lie. It's good to have that confidence and that ability to say, like, no, I smell your shit, mate. Like, let's be real.
Oh, yeah.
And I think
one of the other coolest things about that era of chaos magic was all the online activity. Like, if you were in Yahoo groups back in the day, you had the Axe and the Chaos Matrix and fucking the Z cluster, and all those things were fantastic. And the Chaos Matrix site is still up today.
I just posted
all that stuff is still there
a couple months ago on my Facebook. I remember there's just the random Usenet snippets, and it's like an archaeology dig, and it's such like a weird, cool nostalgia going back there. Like, what's funny, and this is I guess it's a little synchronicity that we're bringing this up right now. I was talking to him on my drive over here like a half hour ago. He brought up,
I wanted to do a thing on the Ice Wars.
Yeah, he brought up the remember those things? And
yeah.
And about a year ago, I was doing a live stream series during COVID, and I was kind of digging into our past and a lot of my Chaos Kid friends, and a lot of the Chaos Magic community now isn't really super aware of the old Chaos Magic days, like Peter Carroll and like the old Usenet, because I guess they don't really have an opportunity to be in certain ways, but a lot of cool stuff happened on just a magical occult history level. Some of it's pretty cringy, but it is interesting. It's like, can we talk about that? And I said, I can, dig into it and kind of refresh, and that'd be cool. But it's the fact that you brought that up and you remember the alt.magic days, and for their good in Yahoo and GeoCities and all, like, and that was the Wild West of the internet.
I haunted the shit out of Paganism Chat Room 1.
Yahoo Chat user rooms and all their disturbing quality of people.
Yeah, that was how I got into, when I started really wanting to do paganism. I would use like old forums and chat rooms and things like that, and I tried to get into a bunch of different forums. So like obviously the Norse stuff was there, but then I tried to find like the local druids, and I would always try to find local groups, and I could never quite find the ones that were actually doing anything, because they had the website up, but they hadn't done anything since '98.
Yeah,
this was in like 2008 or 2009. So like 10 years ago they were active, but not anymore. So yeah,
I'm always interested, like, how people who never, they kind of grew up in MySpace was probably like the first internet they saw, maybe how they look back, and like it's such a surreal time, because the internet's such a huge part of everyone's existence now. It's like a second sub-reality in a way. You think about it, and like it was such a different energy. Like it was like an embryo popping up out of the aether, and
there still hasn't been, like, this surprises me, because there was, like Drawing Down the Moon is in its fourth reprinting now. And it was written in the 80s or the 70s or something, a book all about like major influences and whatnot, modern paganism as it's becoming a thing. And I just think I'm stunned. Maybe I'm going to have to write it someday. There's been nothing really written about how powerful and influential certain figures were through the internet. Just the fact that those Yahoo groups were there that were so specialized. And then you had forums. Like one of my favorite forums for years was mysticwix.com. Don't go there now. I think some hackers got a hold of it, but it was fun times. But then you had like, there's that big window as well where people have kind of moved away from chat rooms. They're not doing the groups anymore. The forums are kind of quiet, but you got really powerful and influential voices on blogs just doing their own thing there. Like Gordon White in his early days on RuneSoup was some of the best grown up, like Chaos Magic grew up with him in his lens when he was writing in his early days. Jason Miller had his blog where he was writing so much great content, and it was just there to have it, like super impactful people on how people practice magic and sorcery and everything still today. And it all started because they were writing these free things on Blogger, or WordPress free sites.
Yeah, it was such a treasure. Like, just sometimes I miss it. I guess I'm being a little nostalgic, but there was no hierarchy. It was just like this person's posting their work and this person's posting their work, and you stumbled on it and you talked, and that was just it. But no, we were talking about chaos magic, and now we're thinking about it. So you mind if I throw a question out about your old days or right now? Like,
I'm the guest here. You ask all the questions you want.
So fair. So I imagine you had your way with like sigil magic and chaos magic style of casting back in the day.
Yeah.
Did you ever have any result with it?
Oh, absolutely. Sigils are my jam. I love sigils. I've moved away a lot from, the write out a statement of intent, remove repeating letters, create some thing out of that. I kind of got really into Gordon. He taught a thing about like using what he calls the robo-fish, like creating a sigil for something you're going to do. Like, I'm going to floss twice tomorrow, that kind of thing. And then put that in and create a bunch of shit, different sigils and stuff to go in with that for whatever your method of launching is, and put them all out there at once. And the idea being like this one, is going to happen without a doubt, is going to carry the rest of them through. I played with that quite a bit. I like that idea still. But my sigils, like, on one hand, when I got into runes, at the same time I'm getting into chaos magic, like there's a whole idea of bind runes and combining the different runes into a unique shape or a unique purpose. That is sigil magic to me. It's operating on the same wave, I think.
That's how I felt when I read Galdebrock, the Icelandic grimoire. It felt very much like sigil magic.
Yeah. I just think they operate on the same wave. You're taking things that mean something individually and combining them into something new and unique. I really, really like what Laura Tempest Zakroff has entered into the realm of sigil magic. It's much more artistic. It looks more magical. It has more specific, I think, purpose and power behind it in a lot of ways. She goes back to using like some of the earliest symbols that were found in cave art and bringing those symbols forward into sigil practice. And it's producing some interesting results. I've been experimenting with that for some time now. Yeah. And
yeah, you've had her on your show.
I have, and I apologize to Tempest now that I haven't had her back yet. I'm certainly going to remedy that soon. And I'm sorry to say that it wasn't until I had her on my show. I had her on my show because I read her book, Weaving the Liminal, which I think is one of the most incredible, raw, honest, like emotional books on modern witchcraft I've ever read. It's written in this style similar to like Lon Milo Duquette's autobiography kind of style of what is it called?
Living with Spirits.
Living with
My Life with Spirits.
Yeah, it's in that same kind of vein, but it's way more raw and emotional. Like there's a part in there where she talks about, being in an abusive relationship with her husband and what that was doing to her. And like all I kept thinking, I had to have her on my show so I could ask her how that made her feel as a witch.
Yeah, because that's some of the most important things that inform your practice. Like people sometimes think like, well, magic is the rituals I do here and there. But like when you're in a magical life, it's everything.
Right.
It builds you and makes you into, the work you're doing. And you know what I mean, I think.
Yeah.
Like it's all parts of your life,
it took until she was on my show for her sigil stuff to really catch my attention, because she had the book out, Sigil Witchery, and I didn't read it. Okay, I thought I'd read everything there was out there on sigils already, and I couldn't have been more wrong. I hope, and I'm sure it has, like her particular approach to sigil magic is like graduate level work, if we're going to compare it to education systems, compared to like the just raw down and dirty style of Austin Osman Spare.
I'm going to check her book out. Like it's on kind of my list of books that I'd like to look at, but I think I'm going to, like, that's something you telling me about that I really want to read it. And her work.
I could not recommend it more, especially to anyone who has a background in chaos magic. I'm telling you, this is going to revolutionize and breathe brand new creative life into your sigil work. Promise it. I guarantee it.
I was bringing it up because I know, a lot of our listeners, like even today, a lot of people get their first introduction to certain kinds of magic, and sigil magic, some of the, I don't want to say the easiest kind of, but it's very accessible to, if you don't want to get into, doing a huge ritual with a bunch of materia and stuff. It's like, well, you can do magic right now. So I was thinking about that. Before we, stop talking about sigils, I guess, what do you think one of your most memorable results using, we'll go with just sigil magic in a chaos magic sense, any you could share?
Yeah, my most memorable is an ongoing project. I called it Operation Bizarre because I was reading a bunch of stuff by Raw back in the day. Robert Anton Wilson, he was my jam. In fact, Cosmic Trigger is on like my top 10 must read. You want to be a wizard, Harry? You got to read Cosmic Trigger.
Yes, you do. 100 agreed. Listeners, get on your Raw game, please.
Yeah. So I was reading the Illuminatus trilogy for the 6th time or something. And every time I'd read it, it got less and less confusing, I think. But they have the whole thing in there about Operation Mindfuck. But it got me thinking, like, could I create a sigil, for one, that I could hide somewhere or place somewhere that would create like hauntings or just more magical energy, or like put a crack in the field, fuck with people's heads somehow? And I thought, what am I going to do? So I nailed it down. I wrote out all these ideas, and what I decided ultimately to do is I call it Operation Bizarre. And I wrote about it on my blog. I relaunched the whole idea because the forums have all disappeared. Operation Bizarre 2.0, still the same practice. The idea is that you create a sigil that brings that kind of thing into the world, right? Creating cracks in those spaces. We're trying to create more liminal places. Put it on pennies, the coin, a penny, and leave them in public places, because pennies are so just, you'll see them and forget them. Well, what's kind of the trick to sigil magic? Sink it in there and forget it, right? So it's kind of a subtle way to get them out there. And yeah, absolutely, I've seen some results. Just, it's one of those things that you can approach with the results oriented magic idea of chaos magic. Like, I need measurable results. So where am I going to place these? Oh, I'm going to place it somewhere where nobody's ever told ghost stories, basically, and see if I start getting people telling ghost stories in the next couple months that are in that particular area or that space and location. Yeah, it's been so much fun that I've been doing it for like 20 years.
Well, that's really cool, because that's something that we're trying, that has been one of my things for a while, especially with starting the show, is, finding ways that we can use magic to, re-haunt a certain area that's never, had that kind of lore behind it, and kind of, being active in creating modern folklore.
Yeah, why not? Because, I mean, all that stuff had to come from somewhere anyway. Like, when I interviewed Connor Randall, for instance, Connor, you've seen Connor. If you've seen Hellier, he was on Hellier with Craig and Dana and everybody. Connor and Carl used to be the hosts, the guides, the ghost tour guides at the Stanley Hotel, and that for years. And they have this story about a ghost named Eddie. And when I was interviewing Connor about all this, we got to talking about thought forms and servitors and stuff like that. And through all the research of the history of the place, they're kind of leaning towards the fact that, like, there's no evidence that this Eddie should be there. Like, there's nothing to indicate in the history, not that you could ever know everything. And the nature of a spirit is going to be, I mean, spirits are going to do what they want to do. So Eddie may be from somewhere else and he just likes the hotel. But at any rate, there's always that chance that their constant interaction with the field in this place. When I'm talking about the field, I'm talking about, that web of all there is, all there will be, all there has been. Maybe somehow their collective energy into this created this thing, or created a shell for something to come into to be this thing they call Eddie. And that is a firm part of the Stanley Hotel's folklore that wasn't there before Connor and Carl were doing their work.
I've watched some of their stuff, and there's really cool guys. I was talking, I think, on our episode with Keldon Mercury, I brought this up. And have you read The Mothman Prophecies by Keel?
A long time ago.
Right.
Yeah.
So, and I brought it up then, but ironically, what I brought up is specifically relevant to now. And Keel writes about it, but he wasn't the only one aware. But it was, what was his name? Is it Walter Gibson? Yeah, Walter Gibson, the guy who created the Shadow comic book, or you remember the Shadow novels from back in the 30s?
Mm-mm.
So the Shadow was a kind of like proto-hero, and he would wear like a black cloak and a wide brimmed hat. And Walter Gibson was a prolific author who came up with the Shadow as his character, and he would lurk in dark alleys and jump criminals and things like that. And he lived in a house in Greenwich Village, and he would crank out about a novel a month forever. And yeah, he was, one of those just Stephen King types that are just consistently just downloading onto paper.
When was he writing these books?
Oh, I think in the 30s, 20s, 30s. I think
I didn't know they had cocaine in the 30s.
They put it in all the good drinks. He had the Coca-Cola machine in his office. He's like, I don't know why I'm writing so much. But so the house at Greenwich Village became known as a notoriously haunted place. And afterwards, people would always see this dark figure in a cloak in this wide brimmed slouch hat, and they didn't have any context. And ghost hunters at the time would go in, and it was in like published books of, America's most haunted places. And people would describe this specter that they'd see in the hallways and going up the stairs. And he was depicted with this little huge hat and a cloak. And they thought he might've been like a Revolutionary War ghost, or, a spy, or, any number of things. But later on, the house wasn't haunted before Walter Gibson lived there. There was no history of any of this stuff. But then they realized that the ghost people are seeing is literally a depiction of his character, the shadow, which is in his mind and being projected out on an obsessive level, the entire time he lived there. So
that's very interesting.
Have you ever heard of the Philip experiment?
The what?
The Philip experiment?
It's not ringing any bells.
Okay, so in the 70s, there was I don't remember what the university, but they they basically created a ghost out of nothing. They came up with the name, a backstory, physical features, things like that. And they brought in these people, like, as a blind test, and they asked it to communicate with this ghost named Philip. And they did, and there's video of it. I mean, they would ask it questions. The Ouija board would respond accurately. There's parts where they ask it to raise up the table, and the table moves by itself. But there's no historical figure named this person or looked like this person, but they got results. The actual study gets kind of talked down about. Yeah, well, when you look it up, you get a lot of flack. Like in the articles that talk about it.
Oh, of course.
But I mean, the results are there, and it's a very interesting study, and kind of one of the first big aspects of the thought form theory in the public eye, if that makes sense. And so, I battle with that a lot, because to me, everything is spirits. Like, that's just kind of how I came into magic. Like, the spirit model 100%. And so I think that there's an aspect of it that, like you were saying with the shell, you create these shells for something that's already existing to slip into and to take that form. But yeah, so that kind of brings me to a topic. What is your opinion on the psychological versus spirit model in your own magical practice? And if you have if there's any kind of debate in your mind about it, or if they're kind of coexist.
Oh, I absolutely think they coexist. I mean, the models as they were put forward, like in the 90s or whatever, it might be a good way to sort of conduct experiments just to see maybe where you tune in best or connect best. But I don't think like any of that stuff it separates in reality. Like, are there spirits? Yep. Are some of them just part of my mind? Yep. Are some of them just information models? Probably. It's just a whole spectrum. I kind of look at it like this. It's one of those things that comes from like the spookiness of quantum physics, right? And here I go about something up I don't know about. So
I always preface
it's like particles and waves. We just stick to this, right? Particles and waves. And in quantum physics, they talk about how everything exists in this wave everywhere all at once until it's measured, and then they know its location or whatever. So I kind of think that tells us something maybe about how divination works, maybe even how magic and stuff works, invocation works. Because I talk about the field a lot, and I get the concept. I call it the field. That's what Aidan Walker calls it in 6 ways. It's just talking about the web, the thing that everything is connected to, right? So when it comes to magic, for me, that is the fabric. That is the essential fabric of the multiverse, is whatever it is that we call magic. That's the thing that scientists are always trying to pin down and figure out what the fuck it is. I don't think it's a thing we'll ever know exactly what it is. The Greeks called it quintessence, and I think that's a fitting word for it just because it's easy to say and hard to spell. It's just like when you approach magic, when you do magic, whatever form of magic you're doing, whether it be a sigil or calling on spirits or invoking gods, you are measuring a point in the field, and it becomes that point now. And as you call on it and you do it, it immediately gets a past, a present, and a future right then and there.
So just your thought, and I don't mean to cut off because this is what you're saying, like I can't say, well, this is, here's my take on it, because your take is literally what I would say, and like kind of how I view it as well. But one of the big projects that I've been working on for a couple of years, and it does involve divination and spirit work, kind of with intermediaries, and I won't data dump all that, but literally, as you're saying, like that idea, and given none of us know everything about quantum mechanics, because nobody does,
No.
but the theories, some of those works tell us and inform us, are also informed by when you practice magic for a long time with that mind, they do lead to the same place, and it's functional, like it works into that model. And the idea of that super state is what you were saying, that you could have a near infinity of possibilities on where these two particles can be, but when you observe it, that's where it lands. And part of that work that I've been doing is kind of using divination, and also like blind study divination, to get a bunch of people using the same techniques to kind of almost get the super state of, how do I say it? Like the super state of the different attributes and qualities of objective spirits. And doing a work where because it's subjective. I look at it kind of like an interface that, all the spirits you can work with, there's us, because we're all kind of, we have that spark. Everything has that spark in it. And, we can create, we are spirits in a way ourselves. And there's always an interface on the internal, but that doesn't negate the fact that these spirits are objectively real in the same way externally. But just the fact that you were talking about that super state idea, I think it's very important, because I think you can learn a lot about the nature of entities unto themselves if you keep that in mind. Like, you take that quantum mechanical idea, and add it to everything you're doing and everything you're learning. I just thought it was interesting. I'm agreeing completely, and now you have my brain running on that. But trying to kind of...
that whole idea comes to me in part because I'm such a huge Mitch Horowitz fan. And Mitch Horowitz, since his first book, Occult America, has been pushing these sorts of ideas into the occult realm of thought. And I thought that language makes sense for what we're doing. And the more I explore it, you think about it. Okay, so I'm going to have a ritual here today, and I'm going to honor Odin. And in order to do this ritual, I'm going to call Odin down or wherever to make offerings and so on, receive blessing in return. At the same time, there might be 2,000 other people around the world conducting some sort of ritual in honor of, speaking to, communicating with whatever Odin is in their own way at the same time. And if we all receive some kind of connection, I've heard people put forth, well, it's the mall Santa. Jason Miller likes this theory, like you're not getting Santa, you're getting the mall Santa in all these locations who represents that realm of power and that influence, and is just as good, but isn't necessarily the thing. Okay, that's fine. And that's not necessarily against what I'm saying. I'm just saying that these forces exist along the spectrum of the field, and you can forget about time like we think about it. This is not a linear time thing. It just is. And when we're tapping into it, we're tapping into another like system of consciousness, of existing, of being. And we're sort of stepping out of where we are now. Like, I call it the shallows. Like you're stepping into the shallows. You've created a magical act, and now you're not quite in this world properly anymore. You're not in the other one properly quite as much anymore. But me and those 2,000 other people around the world who are all calling on Odin at the same time tap in, because our act of magic, to steal language in a terrible way from the quantum physics world, we've conducted a measurement, an observation of something in the field, and now it has a position. And it has a past, present, future according to our relationship to it. So,
I think that
to muddy the waters a little more.
That idea, I feel like that's important to the forces that we're communicating with as well, in a certain way. And I couldn't name you how, but the idea of kind of being a potential and then working with us to become actual, maybe, like having that point of existence in time and space in our world. I couldn't say exactly how that would be important, but almost like an idea that you have a potential, but then those forces can work a little more directly on our level too. We work with them and they can work with us.
Sure.
I'm not sure. It's just an idea. But, what you were saying about, summoning Odin and that idea, that I did a work a long time ago, and I'll share it. I think it's relevant. Back when I was, maybe 20, and we were all kind of just like young magician kids messing around with stuff. And, there were certain spirits that, we kind of had worked with that had kind of came to us without going to it. But one of them was kind of a big name angelic being. I'll leave it at that. And we were just like dumb kids. And me understanding we're just kind of like kids. We're not doing anything. We're just kind of, we're learning magic. We're playing with energy. We're kind of learning invocation and we're playing. But we're learning a lot of these techniques directly. And now I look back, I realize that was important stuff. And a lot of people seem to have that upbringing in their magical practice in certain ways. And some of us kind of brush it off. But at one point, I had this, communication with this bigger spirit that was well named. And I was like, well, why are you focused on a bunch of punk kids? We're not doing anything. And you were like this cosmic force. Like, how are you here and not doing everything else? And I got a sort of, I don't call it a vision, but I got kind of an answer to it, and it stuck with me very sharply till this day. And I think it's relevant to what we were kind of talking about. And, I was in that state, and my mind kind of took over, and let's say vision, but I think you know what I mean. Like when you get that projection of communication, and I was kind of looking down over the earth as like a sphere, like, just the globe of the earth. Like I was like a satellite in the atmosphere. And to my right in that state, I just saw this huge, massive black ribbon almost that extended off into infinity in both directions, like bigger than the entire planet. And it was kind of rolling and moving. And I kind of zoomed in, I suppose, in my mind, and it looked like they were all thousands and thousands of like eyes and little tendrils that were moving and everything. And I'm like, whoa. And it was just immense, and it was alive, and it was kind of scary in a way. And it looked like there were little tiny specks that were flying off of it towards the planet, like at any given time. And the spirit that, well, to say it was a angel of death, so to speak. And it's like, look at this. So my question was like, how are you with me and all of you and still doing all this stuff because you're a cosmic being? So he showed me. And I looked at these little specks that were flying off, and I kind of zoomed in this vision. And each of them looked like a different version of how somebody would perceive that kind of angel like you. One of them looked like, kind of an Arabic version of Azrael. One of them looked like kind of a Grim Reaper. One of them looked like, a small child. They all just like looked like these different variations, but they were all a piece of that giant construct, that giant thing. And kind of the answer I got was like, each of these contains all of me, all of them. They're each individual to the person that I need to work with in the way they need to work with me. But each speck, as you see it, contains my totality. And it doesn't limit me at all. And I thought that was just, and it kind of reminded me of like, you hear about like the holographic universe theories and fractals and things like that, where you have this great concept or force that's outside of kind of time and space, but a little bit of it contains all of its essence. And that, it was a weird thing, but as like I learned more about magic going forward in years, it just stuck with me as something that was pretty important, unlike maybe how bigger spirits work. So I don't know if that's relevant to anything you were thinking, but it was kind of a cool thing in the sense that you have like this great.
It sounds like you definitely had an interesting experience.
Yeah, for sure.
And the insight, I think the insight is solid. Like I think when whatever your particular vision or interaction with, especially like bigger size spirits up to the God size, right? I tend to call them all spirits. They're just operating on a spectrum from little to like, what the fuck is that? To, we're all somewhere along in our journey and our skill, and we can only tap in so much anyway. I mean, we're not even aware of most of the shit that's around in the room with us right now. Think of all the particles that are flying through space and through the room you're in, and you can't see a sound wave, and just There's plenty of things. I mean, there's literally billions of dollars passing through the air right now in digital code, and it irritates me. I haven't figured out a way to grab any of it, but you're gonna see what you're capable of seeing. And if you just think about it for a moment, like you say you're talking to like an angelic being. I mean, do we even really have enough eyes to see an angelic being? Do you have enough tongues in your mouth to properly say their name? I mean,
and that's it. Like, I didn't want to stress that was like a thing. So to elaborate on it, it was more like, I'm never going to be one to say for certain, like even in my own practice, like I'm a Chris Rock from Dogma kind of person. People talk about beliefs like, well, I can have a good idea, or I can tell you kind of how it worked for me, but it wasn't really like a privileged circumstance. It was kind of like, how I guess any magician would work when they would summon a spirit or they communicate with a god. And I guess the whole point of that was like, look, we're greater than kind of this world. We're just on a perspective and dimensional frequency, if you want to call it that, that's immense and unconstrained sort of by human perception, in the sense, like, as you say, we're stuck in a meat suit. We don't have the eyes and senses. We can barely see outside of the colors. And it was just kind of a sense that being what they are, some of those spirits, they have the potential to interact with us through our minds and through our consciousness and put a bit of them in a way that we can work with, but it's certainly not their totality. And
agreed.
I think that's kind of what the impression was. Like, hey, we aren't really limited. Like, we can, especially if you want to distinguish, gods and angels, which I kind of do personally. I think they're all kind of their own thing on different levels. That, we're talking about gods and angels. Like, I think if they have a work to do, if they want to work with somebody or answer a prayer or do a spell, like, they can extend a little bit of themselves when they need to. And I think in some of the old grimoire traditions, especially, there's talk about, you work with a god, a lot of times you'll kind of get an intermediary, like Mall Santa. And I think that's kind of what it is. And I don't know, I think there's probably not a lot of distinction. Like, it could be that an intermediary spirit is an extension of a god themselves on a lower level, but it doesn't mean it's not an individual thing. But it's weird, timey-wimey stuff. But, like, that's the heart of, I think, at least why I'm interested in all of it. Like, because this does feed into things like deep quantum physics and what I hope science is going to eventually start getting to. Like, this is the good stuff.
Yeah.
And that's perfect, because now we're going to get into the Patreon segment. So before that, Lonnie, where can everyone find your information?
I'm real easy to find. Just go to weirdwebradio.com. I am slowly but surely making that the one-stop shop for every damn thing that I do.
Yeah, we've been doing the same thing.
Yep.
Well, Lonnie, for all the regular listeners, we want to thank you so much for coming on. We had a real blast talking to you. And so now, everyone, head over on to Patreon, because you'll get to hear the rest of this conversation. And that was our interview with Lonnie Scott. We love talking to him, and we cannot wait to have him on the show again. Of course, there is a Patreon segment to this episode, so if you would like to hear that, you can become a patron starting at just $4 a month. Link for that will be in the show notes, as well as all of Lonnie's links, so you can interact with him yourself. Well, everybody, as always, thank you for coming, and we will see you again on the Strange Dominions.